All right, good evening, everyone. Very excited to share with you some of the thoughts from my trip. I promised you when I left that I would take you along with me. So I tried my best while I was there to send updates and pictures, which is hard to do given all that was going on. So we'll fill it in tonight. I'm glad you've all joined and logged in. What I'm going to do is what I'd like to share first is mostly factual. I'm really just going to try to go through what we did, what we experienced, what we saw, what we learned, and just share that with you. I'm sure I will be making some editorial comments along the way, but I'm going to try to hold that off to the very end and really just share some of my thoughts on, at the end of when I present what we went through, some thoughts that really occurred to me going through that, trying to make sense of everything. If there was one theme that I'd just like to begin my comments with, one theme that just appeared over and over and over again throughout everything that we did. We spoke with politicians, we spoke with rabbis, we spoke with regular Israelis on the streets. We walked around and toured. It was really magnificent. But if there was one theme that went through everything, it's that no one agrees on anything right now in Israel. And I think that's an old story, but in this particular era, at this particular point in time, it was a really beautiful thing. And as I go through everything tonight, I'd like to share with you why I found that to be so beautiful, even though it was so pervasive in absolutely everything that we did.
You were a group of North American rabbis?
Yes.
That was
yeah, I'm going to do it right now. So what was this trip, first of all? So this trip was an RZA Mizrahi sponsored trip. RZA, Religious Zionists of America, together with Mizrahi Olami, sponsored this trip. Mizrahi is a movement. It's been a movement that's been around for a long time, and they very much wanted to reinsert themselves and become on the front lines of the religious Zionist movement and doing things like this. We'll get to a little bit more things that they did along the way. What was the goal of this trip? They were very clear with us. There were three goals of why they put this trip together. Number one was solidarity. They called it a solidarity mission. Israel, as I mentioned on Shabbos, has been slammed over the last 6 weeks in the media by rockets from the left. It's been a difficult couple of weeks in Israel, and it was a very important show of solidarity. As I mentioned on Shabbos as well, if you take 20 rabbis plus a couple of heads of school, you literally are representing over 10,000 Jews in this small little group as we went around. Each rabbi, with his shul, and each head of school with his or her school. It's quite a number. So that was the main thing, to go around to the places that were hit very hard, Sderot, Lod, and places like that. Goal number two, besides the solidarity, was reconnecting. The diaspora is disconnected from the land of Israel. We have been for 18 months. It's been impossible to get into the country. So by taking at least leaders, rabbis, heads of school, and bringing them in, so then when we would come back, so not only do we reconnect with the land, but we then do exactly what we're doing here tonight, which is reconnecting all of you through this trip to our homeland. And that is so important. It's been such a long time that we've not been able to go, and it's hard to be disconnected from home. Literal home, figurative home, spiritual home. It's very difficult. And so reconnecting was the second main goal, to be able to do so. And the third goal was Mizrahi had their own personal goal to share and promote Mizrahi programs and be part of the Mizrahi world and put that front and center in the group of rabbis together with their communities when we would come home and share that. I, of course, had my own fourth personal goal, which is I haven't seen my parents in 18 months. I haven't seen my sisters in 18 months, and it's so hard to get into the country. The only way to get into the country right now is you have two basic ways of getting in. One is if you have a first-degree relative in the country, which I happen to have, but it's a lot of bureaucracy. It is not simple to be able to get an ishur. Ishur is the word for a visa, special ishur. If you have an ishur, it's gold right now to get into the country. It's really an amazing thing how hard it is to get in. So I could have tried that route, but it was very complicated. So when I got the email from Mizrahi, from Rabbi Ilan Mezer, who's Mizrahi Canada, saying we're running a trip, and it happened to have been over the Shabbos that my sister was making a bar mitzvah, so I immediately emailed. I said, "Can I leave for Shabbos if I come?" He said, "Sure." I said, "Amen." That's if I can get into the country with your group. Originally, of course, they were supposed to open up the skies to tourists on July 1st. They pushed it off to August 1st, and now they pushed it off to September 1st. It's complicated to get in. As I was preparing for this trip, literally right before we left, I began preparing for Tisha B'Av. what I hope to give a couple of shiurim on as we get to Tisha B'Av on Sunday is some of the writings of the Piazetzler Rebbe, the Eish Kodesh of Kalanimus Kalman Shapiro, who perished in the Warsaw Ghetto. And I was reading about his works and about his life, preparing for the shiurim, as I was trying to get a visa. My visa was going to be pretty straightforward with this trip, but my son, who went on a program with NCSY, had tremendous complications getting his visa, and we were literally trying everything possible to get this poor kid a visa. And I was so struck by the reality of here I am. We're very familiar with the Holocaust. We're familiar with the story of those waiting for visas to get out of certain countries, to get into certain countries. And here it is, 75, 80 years later, not 1938 Germany or Ukraine or Russia. I'm sitting in New York, the land of the free, trying to get into my own homeland. I can't do it without a piece of paper. I can't get in. Won't let you on a flight. And it was such a contrast of decades apart. Thank God it was not a life and death situation, but just the idea that how can it be? So we've almost gotten used to this idea. Unfortunately, 18 months, you can't go home. So to be able to do so, to be able to have the ability to go home and to visit and to be there was really, of course, my own personal fourth agenda. You could have sent me on any trip in the world, I would have jumped on it, but this happened to be a nice one to join in together. Even with your visa, you still needed a COVID test within 72 hours of getting on the flight. When we landed immediately, the first thing we needed to do was take a COVID test in the airport, and then you can start the photo album. Then once you get there, you'll see, because it's so hard to get in, the first thing you notice when you get to this first picture.
I'm just going to share it with everybody.
Okay, we're just sharing it with all those online. Okay, right. You can see, I don't know the guys in those glasses. I don't recognize that fellow over there. I'm not sure who that is, but you might notice how empty it is in the background. What's usually this bustling area of the airport. You just don't have a lot of people, and that was a theme walking around Mamila Mall, going to the Kotel. I needed to catch a Marav. I was with my father, my parents, late at night, 11 o'clock at night, 11:30. I was about to go back to the hotel. I said, "Can you just drive me to the Kotel? I'll catch a Marav, and I'll walk back to the hotel." We were staying at the Prima Kings, not far from the. It's like, I don't think you'll get a minion. It's July at the Kotel. What do you mean I'm not going to get a minion? They're no tourists. They're no tourists. There aren't any. And it gets late at night. I don't know if he was right, but the fact that that's the sentiment was hard. Anyway, we land. The next slide. So we go. This is a bomb shelter. This is so Israeli. It's like welcome to the country. You get off of the plane, you take a COVID test in the airport, and then you go straight to this little bomb shelter. This is in a little town, like literally a dirt road kibbutz, 10 minutes outside of the airport. Downstairs in the bomb shelter is the serology testing. There's a whole bunch of nurses in there. You can't even believe here. Yes, this is where we do it. You line up outside. It's like this bright sun. You get your test, and then you quarantine. Quarantine is serious. The hotels take it very, very seriously because if anyone is caught breaking the quarantine until you get your test results, the hotel will lose its license and this, that, and the other. So once we did all of this, the first thing we did is we go to the hotel, and that's where we're going to be. We got to the hotel around Israel time, around noon, 1 o'clock. We were told to expect to be in our rooms until 10 o'clock the following morning. That's what we were told to expect. The Prima Kings is a lovely hotel. They're not very big rooms, but it was lovely. And it ended up, we got our results by 6 o'clock that night, 6, 7 o'clock. And so since they had scheduled nothing for us because they thought we would be in our hotel rooms until the following morning, it's a free night, hit the town in Yerushalayim. So I went to go see my parents right away. I was able to walk to the Kotel the following morning for Shabbos. It was very, very nice to be able to do so. The first thing we did is we went to Lod the following morning. Friday morning, we hit Lod. Lod is, I went to the Kotel the Friday morning. There were people, Baruch Hashem, there are people at a regular time. There are lots of people at the Kotel. You got the regular experience, but there are no tourists. It's an Israeli scene. And normally July, if you go July to the Kotel for Shabbos, you should just expect to be there for 3 hours saying hello to everybody from all four corners of the earth that you run into at the Kotel. And that was missing. That was missing. It just didn't We get to Lod. Lod is a fascinating city. It was a big hotspot, as unfortunately you all know, during the recent violence. It has been a model of coexistence of Arabs living together with Israelis. And there were riots in the streets, terrible riots. There were some deaths. There were shuls vandalized, burnt down. The kinds of things that we heard about in Europe 100 years ago happened in Israel, in our homeland, where shuls, cars burnt down, rioting in the streets. Very, very difficult place. So we went to meet with some of the people, and what we discovered was really, it's, as I said, just really, really interesting. First of all, it's right next to the airport. It used to be identified with the airport, but outside, it shares with the 5 towns in New York. The planes constantly flying overhead. But outside of that, there is nothing similar to the 5 towns and to the city of Lod. That's where the comparisons end. Lod is a low-income city. It's actually, it's embroiled in Arab-Israeli controversy, if you will, starting all the way back to 1948. It was one of the cities that the Arabs, depending on which narrative you read, left, were kicked out, Iran, whatever you want to say, but there was clearly an Arab population there before the War of Independence that left. Some came back, some didn't come back. Jews moved in. The numbers have varied as to what percentage is Jewish, what percentage is Arab, but it was the Jews that came were immigrants. They came from Ethiopia, they came from Tunisia, they came from Morocco, they came from Russia, and it was always low income, cheap housing, a place to be. The Israeli government would send, over the years, we were told, all of the informants that they had cultivated in the West Bank or in Gaza when it was no longer safe for the Arab informants to continue living wherever they were. So the Israeli government would swoop in and pull them out, and they needed to resettle them somewhere. Where do you resettle them? If you put them in Petach Tikva, they'll stand there like a sore thumb. How did this one Arab end up in Petach Tikva? So they would send them to Lod, and there was a very high percent. It's really just an interesting place. And we discovered we were set up with several different members of the Lod Jewish community to speak about what happened. And we discovered, as I mentioned, the theme of tonight is those 3 Jews that we met had very different understandings of what happened, perspectives on what happened, and where the future lies. There are actually at least 3. These are broad stroke, different categories of Jew living in Lod. There are some that have been living there for 30, 40 years. This was their home. They moved in 50, 60, 70. They've been there for many, many years. And they're part of the culture of the city of Lod. There are other Jews who moved about 15 years ago in about 2005 as part of a Garin Torani. It literally means like a seed of Torah. There would be pockets of Jews that would move into various communities to be a seed, to raise the level of observance and to various different things. Those that move to be part of this Garin Torani are idealistic, they are passionate, they've come with a mission, they want to teach, they want to host, they want to do all the things that you would have like a shliach, except they're a shliach within Israel. Someone explained to us while we were there that there were a lot of Garin Toranis that began in around 2005, which is not coincidental. The summer of 2005, of course, was the disengagement. We have lots of different terms for that as well over the course of our stay from Gaza. The Gaza Strip, where the Jews left, shall we say. Evacuated, were kicked out, whichever phrases you want to use. But the bottom line is there were tens of thousands of Jews who were homeless and who had been living in Gaza because most of them, not all of them, many of them were idealistic and wanted to settle the land. And they began, a lot of them, finding places and we keep looking to expand the borders and resettle new areas. But there's so many cities within Israel proper that don't have a religious component. Let's move there. And a lot of them began moving to various cities and setting up shop there. So you have a second group of Jews who moved there recently for that. And then there's a third group of Jews who moved just because it's cheap housing, just a place to live. It's a city, it's in the heartland, it's not far from the airport, it's not far from Tel Aviv, it's not far from Yerushalayim. You can get to wherever you need to go. It's a place to live. Now, those are 3 very different groups. Those who move with idealistic reasons and they want to settle and they want to grow and they want to develop. And you have those who just were looking for a place to live and those who've been there for 30, 40 years. The Arabs who live there, and it's ranged from different neighborhoods, 70% Arab, 30% Arab. Some started at 70% and now it's 30%. What was explained to us as well which was fascinating to me. It's something that I had never really understood, even as we were watching the riots and with such rage, like from here, like, I can't believe they're doing this. And one of the people who spoke to us said, I have been friends with my Arab neighbors for 15 years. I watched them from my mirpesets. I watched them pointing out to the mob. That's a Jewish car. That's a Jewish car. That's a Jewish car. I watched it happen. She's like, how am I supposed to go back? And like, how do I walk into such a supermarket? I used to shop in Arabs. I can't. So it was a lot going on. It was explained to us as follows. When, the Arab narrative obviously is very different than the Jewish narrative as to what's gone on in the land of Israel over the last 73 plus years. Within that narrative, so when the Jews started a new settlement, a new city, and develop it, so there's another city somewhere that's now begun to flourish, which is obviously a thorn in the side of our Arab cousins. Lod and cities similar to it have a different aspect, and it was such an eye-opener just to hear a different perspective. When the Jews began moving into Lod more and began with their Garin Torani and began bringing in more Yiddishkeit, it wasn't just that there's another settlement somewhere in the land that the Jews are taking over and, so to speak, they're taking over the land. They're taking over my city. This was my city. This was an Arab city. And now it's not just there's another piece of land that's being developed. It's my home became Jewish. That created a much more volatile situation. And as much as Lod has been promoted as this peaceful coexistence, really not so simple. And that there was a lot of underlying rage, hatred, and lots of other words that exploded. The three Jews that we spoke to, when they spoke about it, had a very different perspective. Where was the police? Police was nowhere to be found during the first several days of riots, as houses and cars and shuls are being torched by a mob. And it clearly had not been planned this way. And the people who were organizing it were not happy that this happened. But what happened was we had three different groups. No, I'm presenting it like as if it was organized of three different categories of Jews. It wasn't organized that way. It was like we invited a couple of people. And all of a sudden, the first one gets up and starts saying, and the police were nowhere to be found, and they did it on purpose. They wanted to allow. And then this one gets up and starts yelling, that's not at all what happened. The police were afraid. The police were scared. The police had no idea. And this one saying, it was sort of like, we stood back and let them get some anger out of their system. Like a lot of different approaches, whether or not just using the police as an example, were the police complicit, aware, and basically said, let's give them a few days, like to let off some steam, or were they literally just unprepared, or were they purposely incompetent? Everyone wasn't clear where to go moving forward. So the Jews who came there with passionate, idealistic, they're like ready to rebuild. And one shul has been destroyed 3 times in the last 15 years. Once by a fire. I asked the fellow, the next picture. This is standing outside one of the shuls. This shul has been destroyed 3 times. And people come in and rebuild it. And you can't believe how fast they come and they rebuild. When we were there, we were expecting to see like a war zone, and there's almost no remnants left. People from all over the country came in, they rebuilt quickly. We were in the shul, which had been destroyed, and they have a stand of all the relics of things that had been destroyed from the first fire, and then from the second time that it happened, and then it happened just again now. And they rebuilt. It's an amazing thing to be in that kind of situation and just continuously be able to do so. Give me the next slide. This woman is one of the women who live here. You just see like this. She lives in this apartment complex, and they're Arabs, Ethiopians, Jews, all in it. It's not a nice place. It's old. It's run down. It hasn't been painted in 40 years, and it could use a little bit. And she was just describing, but this is our home, and we're here to live a mission-driven life, purpose-driven life, to build, to be part of, to bring more Torah, to bring more life. And she said it in a way of, when we make things better for the Jews, we make things better for everyone in town. Everything we do just improves everything that's here. You'll see right upstairs, we were meeting right downstairs, this is one of the houses, the apartments that was destroyed. You can see in the background and the next picture as well. This is the one apartment they left as is. Every other apartment, again, volunteers came, they swooped in, and within 2-3 weeks, everything was redone. This apartment, the people were not there when it was destroyed, and they didn't want to stay. They left. They're not moving. They're not coming back to Lod. So the Jewish community wants to leave it as is. Since they're not moving back in, it should be. There should be a sign of what happened. There was a pogrom in our city, and they left it that way. And you walk in, and it's heartbreaking. That it's heartbreaking anywhere in the world, but in a Jewish city. Just to have that kind of destruction was difficult. That's why they wanted to leave it that way, and so we were there as well. I want to show you the sign. This is outside the yeshiva, was also destroyed and has also been rebuilt. There's a yeshiva there, and the sign, Achenu Toshevei Lod, our brothers, our dear brothers, those residents of Lod, Tamid Itzchem, we are with you. We give you hugs. We strengthen each other. You know, that's the sign on the outside of, and this is the sentiment. There's, again, one sentiment that I mentioned earlier was a woman who said, I don't know, I'll never walk into an Arab store again. I can't. How can I? I watched the point. I watched them, say, and then you have others, the yeshiva, which was torched and has been redone, is trying to promote, let's do this together. Let's build, let's strengthen, and we can make this work. Yeah.
I heard that in Lod, average piece of the second salary that they have you heard anything?
So as I said, the theme tonight is everyone has a different opinion. We heard lots of opinions. Like the facts are, the police were nowhere to be found. They were not there.
The reason why.
Why? Were they afraid? Were they giving them a chance to let off some steam? Were they paid it off? You'll hear it all. I don't know, at least not in a way that I can tell you publicly. I don't know what the answer to that is. What was pointed out to us, what's fascinating about Lod is the Jewish-Arab approach has always been, for the last 70 years, just keep them separate. And whenever there's a problem, build a wall. Keep them on that side, and that'll hopefully make peace. In Lod, it came to a head that you can't, because they live next door to each other. Can't build a wall. And that made it complicated. And they still don't know. It is a tenuous situation. That much I can tell you. Those who have the resolve of let's rebuild, it's very tenuous when it's a powder keg. You saw it was a powder keg. We still live right next door to each other. As I mentioned, Lod is different because it's a combined city in the sense of every time the Jews rebuild and more families move in is a sense of you're taking over my city, which it furthers the spark to the powder keg, and it's tenuous. What will be there? We don't know, but it was fascinating to be there, to see the scenes, to meet the people as we were there. Okay, let's move on to our next. Oh, one other thing. I did want to say that the Jewish community of Lod hosts in 4 different shuls every Friday night an open Friday night meal for the Jewish community. No questions asked, no reservations needed, just an open sense, which is part of this community sense or feel that they're trying to create. And they get hundreds of people who come to the 4 different shuls within Lod, just as a sense of building community. Well, another theme that we came across a lot over the course of our trip was the reality, the tension in Israel between the Haredim, between the secular, between the Atilumi, the religious Zionists, and all of the, and within that were many instances of beautiful expressions of what Torah Judaism is all about, which is reaching out and sharing our experiences. And sometimes the press, and even what we were listening to, is often focused on the tensions and the conflict. But in hearing about that from those who are, the community funds it and they fundraise for it to be able to have these meals is a beautiful thing. On that note, I'll just add, Yair Silverman, I assume some of the longtime Montrealers are familiar. I met him for the first time. So he is a Rav in, I forgot which town he told me he's in. He's got a small shul. He's doing kiruv mostly with secular Israelis, but he has a community of Jews. And there was a bike race not long ago. I think I was in Israel. Was it 2 years ago, maybe? One of the European major bike races came to Israel. It was funded by the Montreal fellows. Yes, Adams funded it. And so they rode through Israel. And they happened to have ridden through his town. His shul happens to be on the road that they rode by. So one of the organizers found out that there was a shul along the way, contacted him and said, what can you do? Like, we're going to have all these, the bike riders. So you find out it's on Shabbos. It wasn't just Stam. It was like on Shabbos, like during his davening, they're going to have this thing. So he was trying to figure out, what should we do? A coffee and cake, a quick shear. And the guy says, no. We're going to zip by you in 0.003 seconds as we're flying by in our bikes. We want you to have some type of sign, not to knock over the bikers, as those following the trends, but, some type of sign, set back that, some type of style. Anyway, it's trying like, what do you do? What sign on Shabbos for the bikers riding by should he promote from his shul? So he came up with a quote from the Mesilas Yesharim, a classic Musar work, the Path of the Just, that says, Zrizus, acting with alacrity and speed, mida mushlemet, is a perfect, a wholesome, I don't even know how best to translate that, is a fantastic trait to have the trait of Zrizus, of that when something needs to be done, you're quick to get it done. So he put this big sign up outside of the shul as the bikers are flying by, that the organizers were so taken, they're like, that's an awesome sign. He has had, with the organizers and his group, 25 different learning sessions since then. They meet like once every 2-3 months. It's still ongoing. They get together and they study. They go, where's that quote from? He said it's from a classic Jewish word. And they have an ongoing study group. And this is another example, a little anecdote of sometimes a small little thing, if you're interested and you spend enough time trying to learn, to teach, to share, to reach out, you really never know what comes of that. Okay, that was Friday. Shabbos, I missed. They shared Friday night with Sivan Rav Meir and her husband Yedidya, who we of course hosted in October of 2019, right before the pandemic. So they joined them for a Friday night. And they went to Rabbi Freundlich shul and heard his sermon, had a personal meeting with him on Shabbos afternoon. And I share that because those are two of my favorite Israeli, you call Rabbi Freundlich Israeli personalities, favorite Israeli people living in Israel, everyone describe that. And that's how much I love my family that I gave up on both of those to participate in the Bar Mitzvah, which was beautiful. Sunday was our rabbinic day. We met with a number of rabbis. This is David Staff, who we've also hosted here in Montreal a number of times. I know once while I've been here, I believe he's been here a number of times even before I was here. He came to our hotel. He leads an organization known as Zohar. Oh, is it interesting? So on the Israeli rabbinic scene, there are 3 hot button topics, which have probably been hot button topics for 73 years approximately, but they're still there. One is kashrut. And managing the situation of kashrut. I get these calls all the time from members, whether I was in Atlanta or here in Montreal. Rabbi, I'm going to Israel. What can I eat? Like, I have no idea. I don't know. I don't understand. I can't figure it out when I'm there. I certainly can't figure it out when I'm not there. So it's a big deal. And like all issues, there are a lot of a couple of agencies, and there are those who claim there's a lot of corruption, and there are those who the whole story. So he's trying to clean that up. That's one major issue. Conversion. Huge issue right now because Israel is unique. I don't say unique. Maybe there are other countries like this, but certainly not most Western countries, which tie in the state of being a citizen to being of a religious group. So, for example, in America or Canada, if you want to become a citizen here, no one's going to ask you they don't care what religion you are. Either you're a resident, a citizen, or you're not. But in Israel, of course, very different, and therefore, depending on a person's religious status, will depend on their ability to attain or not attain a citizenship in a certain way. Well, that's great. If you're Jewish, you're in. Well, what makes you Jewish? So the government never really figured out that small detail of you have to be Jewish to become a citizen, but what makes you Jewish? Based on what criteria? How does that work? So as we all know, in the world of Judaism. Things are complicated. There are lots of different streams and voices who want different things. So it's complicated. So he's very involved in that as well. And of course, the relationship between the Haredim and the Chilonim is a big issue in Israel. It's been there for a while as well. So he spoke about us about all three of those issues. His mission is, and I use this term lightly, but it's accurate, a little tongue-in-cheek, as an open war against the Rabbanut of the chief rabbi office, not the personal chief rabbi, but the office of the chief rabbi in Israel. That sounds harsh, but it's not. It's a matter of saying, as he said this very openly, when you have a monopoly breeds problems. If you have competition, if you have freedom of different organizations, well, then everybody's got to up their game, because that's what capitalism is all about. So he believes very, very strongly, as he was very open with us, as Zohar is, if we could take conversion and kashrut out of the hands of the chief rabbinate of the state of Israel, open it up to other organizations, you would then get a much more transparent and raise the level of all things across the board, the way the conversion is done, the way the kashrut is run. So he gave us an entire discussion about this. I'm not getting into all the details. Fascinating insight as to how things actually work now and what he would like to see them as they should be. Very interesting. The short talk he gave us like 40 minutes, and he like dashed out before we could even get a group picture. That's all we did. The whole trip was group pictures. We have like group pictures. So for every Daled Amos, we took another group picture. It was like an amazing. It was like enough pictures already. Anyway, so we didn't get it when I don't think we ever stopped. This is like he ran. Then we had the chief rabbi. I thought you liked this picture. This is Chief Rabbi David Lau shaking hands with Rabbi Steinmetz, and I'm right behind him looking at. So it's a nice thing. We did a group picture with him as well. We then met with Rabbi Lau. Rabbi Lau, I actually had a chance to spending a Shabbos with him about a little bit less than 2 years ago. He is the son of Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, who is royalty and nobility, a Holocaust survivor. And his son, Rav David Lau, has a lot of the same charm from his father. And so he came in, and there was a mix-up in between our group and his secretary. He thought he was coming in for a photo op, which is true. That's what we did. But we also expected him to speak to us for like 45 minutes. And we like sitting around this big mahogany table, and all these rabbanim came in from North America, and we're ready to meet the chief rabbi. And he like came in, and he saw us all sitting around, and he's like we saw him speak to the leader of our group. He's like, and he's like, well, we're here to ask the rabbi questions. And he was like totally unprepared. His secretary came in 3 times to say like, no, you have like something else is going on. But he gave us 20 minutes. So we said, give us the state of affairs. If I could tell you that what he did was, he went point by point, every single thing we had heard earlier in the morning from Rav David Stav about why the chief rabbinate needs to be dismantled and opened up to free competition, and why that's going to be the solution. He literally, without even knowing that we had just met with Rav Stav, he literally said, let me explain something very important to all of you. The most important symbol in all of Israel is the symbol of the chief rabbinate. If there is anything that needs to be strengthened, it's the chief rabbinate. Kashrus will fall apart if there's no chief rabbinate. Conversion will be a disaster if there's no chief rabbinate. And he said, the most important thing is to build, to improve, shiputzim, but never destroy. It was an amazing thing to hear 2 approaches as to and they both are like, the future of the Jewish people depends on getting all these things in order, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it like this, we're going to do it like that. So it was really wild, but it's classic, and that's 2 different approaches, and both are right. We have to have a strong chief rabbinate. There has to be a centralized authority, and when you only have one body, so things fall through. You have What's the solution? I have no idea. I'm not claiming to have any solutions to that, but it was literally as if they must have done this many, many times, because just like they brought the same examples, the same stories, the same understanding. Like, well, here's the problem, and this is how we're going to. we're going to fix it by doing away with the system and recreate a new one. No, we're going to fix it by, I need your help. He said, let's make it better. It was really fantastic. It comes up again. You'll see these themes are really everything that was going on. Anyway, he's a fantastic person. Again, I had the chance to spend Shabbos with him, and it was just great for us as Rabbanim and to bring back. This is what the religious leadership is struggling with. Hey, we have a problem. We have a problem. Kashrus is a problem. It's complicated. It's how do you make this work? Conversion is a problem. The relationship between the different factions is a problem. Okay, we've all agreed now. Everybody is clear and open. If Rav Stav has accomplished that, where that's now on the agenda, he succeeded. How do we fix the problem? Okay. I quoted, I think at some point, I don't remember where, but I'll get to him in a moment. Matan Kahana was in the government, said the phrase in the course of his talk that applied to many different things. We haven't solved any of these problems in our first 73 years of existence. We're not going to solve it this week either. We'll get there. We're working on it. It's being worked on. How much I can say? It's being worked on. God willing, we'll come to it. Anyway, next. Then we heard from Rav Rimon, Rav Yosef Rimon. Rav Yosef Rimon is a giant, not giant of a person, stature. You see, he's actually the shortest of us standing. It's my brother-in-law and my niece. My brother-in-law lives in Efrat, who's very close with Rav Rimon. Rav Rimon, who writes Svarim like he's davening Shachris, like every other day. He just comes out, and they're gorgeous. They're clear, sourced on Pesach. It's amazing. See, he gave us a talk on Shemitah. We had a halachic share with him on Shemitah. This coming year is going to be a Shemitah year. So he talked to us about Shemitah. I want to share some things which he said in a moment. He gave us a copy of his book, which was quite a treat. So my brother-in-law happened to be in Yerushalayim, so he came to listen in. Rav Rimon, who's running numerous organizations, really running numerous organizations, has a thing for teaching little children. It is the most important thing to him. He has a chavrusa with my niece. He learns Mishnayot with them every once in a while. When they finish a Masechta in school, they call him, and he takes out time to learn with 7-year-olds. They told me a story about him that he was invited to a school to give a shiur, and he walked in and there was like high schoolers, and he said when he walks in, he said, "High schoolers, you told me they were kids. I thought I was talking to the 5-year-old." It's just a passion of inspiring and being machshuv, giving a significance to the next generation. Beautiful. Two things that he gave us. He gave us an introductory remark to his shiur. I want to share one introductory remark and then one comment on his actual on the shiur that he gave. His introductory remark to his comments, he spoke to us about Shemitah again, which is coming up. And he said that what Israel is going through, he said, I know you're here, solidarity, we're having troubles, it's difficult, it's true. It's not new. We've had troubles for a long time. And he referenced an incident, which you may or not have seen. I forgot what they called it. There was a TikTok intifada, like 3 or 4 weeks ago, like before all of this started with the rockets, there was this fad going on in Israel where Arabs were walking up to kids, teenagers, Jewish teenagers, and slapping them or pushing them, and they were recording it, or someone else was doing it on TikTok, and they were uploading it. It became, you guys aren't on TikTok probably. I see the age bracket that I'm talking to. Anyway, TikTok is this social media platform. So it was this thing. And there was one that really went viral. There were 2 yeshiva guys, Haredi yeshiva guys, sitting on a bus, and one Arab was obviously sitting across from videoing it, and the other Arab got up, and as he was walking out of the bus, literally just slaps the 2 of them across the face and walks out of the bus. He said, Rav Rimon said, that's not new in Jewish history. That's not the first time that a Jew's been slapped publicly by a non-Jew in our history. I can bring you less days that it didn't happen than it did happen. Well, you know what's different? He says, now we don't tolerate it. Ein anu sovlim et zeh. You don't get away with it anymore. Now, in Europe, you're like, oh, good. You only slap me, quickly go home, and that's the end of it. That's what's changed, is that we're here. Yes, it's been hard, but we are strong, and we are powerful, and we will no longer tolerate the injustices that are done to the Jewish people. Very fascinating insight. Number two, just one quick word on Shemitah. So he gave us, there are three basic approaches. I hope, God willing, to speak a lot about Shemitah coming up in the next month or two, on both, as we should know how it's going to impact us, be familiar with what's happening in Israel. We should be connected with what's happening in Israel. So there are a couple of different approaches, of which he happens to have one that he feels is most important. But the message that he conveyed over and over again is there's a certain sanctity that fruits that grow during Shemitah have. You can't actively plant during Shemitah, but if you have an orchard, those fruits are going to grow on their own. An apple tree is going to produce apples whether you work the field or not. You're allowed to eat those apples. They just have a certain sanctity. So there's certain ways to deal with it in which we, so to speak, like do away with the sanctity. We avoid it. He was so strong. We don't run from Kedusha. We don't run from sanctity. We're not afraid of that which is holy. We embrace it. Learn the halachas. Learn how to handle it and how to deal with it. It's part of the gift of living in the land of Israel. And he told a story I want to quickly share. He told a story that he was in New York. And he was whatever, speaking here and there, and he had a couple minutes. I mean, he discovered, he's like, I realized I hadn't eaten anything all day. I was like, starving. So he's like, I'm in New York City. So the thing, the Israeli New York City, like, of course, there's a kosher restaurant. He walks outside and assumes that there's going to be a kosher restaurant on his block. Turns out there wasn't. So he walks up and down the block. And he's in the middle of whatever he is. There's no restaurant. So he's like, well, I'm going to get anything to eat. As he's walking out, he sees a supermarket. So he goes to the supermarket and says, oh, I'll find some fruit there. He doesn't, as much as we can't figure out the kashrus in Israel, he was totally lost. I'm sure there were plenty of things under the OU. He wasn't sure what to buy. So he's like, an apple. I'm going to buy an apple. So he goes, he picks up an apple. He holds the apple in his hand. Now, if we were to be blessed to live in Israel, we would have the same thought process. Like, oh my goodness, an apple. Okay, am I allowed to eat this apple? Did they take off truma or meiser? When a Jewish farmer has harvest his crops, he has to take off truma, give it to a Kohen. He has to take off meiser, give it to a Levi. So we do it today. We don't actually give it to a Kohen or Levi, but you have to take off truma meiser before you can eat it. So he says, did anybody take off truma or meiser from this apple? So he said, no, I'm in New York. I'm in New York. This for sure came from somewhere where it's not applicable. I don't have to worry about it. Okay, I don't have to worry about truma. I don't have to worry about meiser. What about Shemitah? Do I have to worry about Shemitah? He's like, no, I'm in New York. I don't have to worry about it. It's fine. He said, and then I thought, oh my goodness, what is this? It's just an apple. There's no truma. There's no meiser. There's no Shemitah. There's nothing here but an apple. Ugh. So I lost my entire appetite. Put the apple down and said, who wants to eat an apple in New York that didn't have any sanctity to it? It didn't grow anywhere where you have to deal with all of the other apple. Listen. He said, I've eaten many apples in New York, don't worry. But like in that moment, when I went through this whole thing and I was like, nope. Anyway, he's a wonderful person. It was a great meeting. Okay, that was our, on our rabbinic day, we actually went to I didn't put the pictures, went to the Kotel tunnels. They opened up a whole new series that just was actually in the news 2 days after we came back. All the news outlets published how they had discovered this new plaza, which we were in 2 days before they opened it up to the public. So I imagine everybody on our tour had been to the tunnel tours many times before, but we were actually in new areas. There's a beautiful shul that they built down there. It's just a fascinating aspect to really see it come to life. And I want to mention one comment as they're excavating and all the archaeology and uncovering so much about the first temple period, for sure the second temple, the first. It's amazing to actually be there, to walk the streets. They've gotten down to street level. You could walk the streets that they walked when they were entering into the Beis HaMikdash. And as amazing as it is, I've made this comment before, I don't remember where or when. So if you've heard from me again, I apologize. But for those of you who've ever been to the Marat HaMachpelah in Hebron, the Cave of the Patriarchs, so before you go into the cave, there's a stop that every tourist group goes to. It's outside the cave, on the steps leading up one of the sides of the cave. There's a series of steps, I think that's 7 steps if I remember. 7, and then it's blackened. And the tourist groups always will stop there and they'll say, why is the wall, the outside wall of the steps leading alongside it, why is it blackened? Because when the Ottomans ruled the area, they didn't allow the Jews into the cave. They were only allowed up to the 7th step. For whatever reason, they picked the 7th step. And there were soldiers stationed there. and they allowed the Jews up the first 7 steps. And so the Jews, from years of praying alongside the wall, you could just like when a candle, you look in, in the house, and the ceiling over where you light your Shabbos candles, it gets blackened over years of. So Jews putting their fingers on the walls, you can see it's black. So on the way into the Maras HaMachpelah, you stop over there, you take a picture of the blackened walls, and then you go in. As much as it's amazing to be in the tunnel tours, one day on our way into the Beis Hamikdash, we're going to stop off and say, oh, here was the street. Oh, the Kotel. Yeah, when I was a kid, the Jews used to daven. And the little kids will say, but you're outside, Abba. What's the big deal about the Kotel? It's an outside wall. Yeah, there's a time where this is as much as take a picture of the Kotel, and now come on, everybody, let's go inside. So it's as amazing as it is to see all the excavations and to see this and to see that. All of it is still on the wrong side. And God willing, one day we'll just wave on our way in and say, yeah, remember when we stopped here, remember this? And now let's proceed in. Okay, Monday was our political day. So we met 3 politicians, all from the religious Zionist camp, meaning within the spectrum of Israelis in politics. Obviously, not everybody is religious. Obviously, not everybody's even Jewish. There are Arabs in Knesset. And within the small sliver of religious Zionist members of Knesset, we met with 3 of them who identified with the Mizrahi movement. We met with, this is Rabbi Betzalel Smolich. I don't think he's a rabbi. He's the son of a rabbi. Betzalel Smolich. He's the head of his newly formed, everything's a newly formed party in Israel. He called this the religious Zionist party. I think that's what he calls it, which everybody's upset about because he took basically a movement and made that the name of his party, which was really confusing to a lot of secular Israelis as to who he represented and what he was. That's a separate discussion. We met with Matan Kahana, who is, I believe, if I understand this correctly, and I do not understand Israeli politics, not actually a member of a party because he was appointed to the Minister of Religious Affairs. First time in about 30 years that the Minister of Religious Affairs is not held by a Haredi position, but by a religious Zionist Jew, which is fascinating. That's because of this new coalition. Haredi weren't part of it. So a religious Zionist Jew is now the Minister of Religious Affairs. And we met with Elazar Stern, who's also a member of Knesset. 3 different party affiliations and all religious Zionists. It was fascinating. I'll tell you why. Each one, we basically sat down and our leader said, "Nu, what are you up to?" Each one launched into a 15-minute dialogue about what they stand for, what they represent, what their goals are, and what their dreams are. Passion, crystal clear. Here are the problems. Here's how we're going to solve it. This is what I'm going to do. This is my job. This is my mission. This is what I need from you. And this is what it's going to look like when I'm done. Now, 2 things on that. Number 1, all 3 were totally different. That was a given. That even within the religious Zionist world, how is Israel going to take the next step? No one has the same idea. Very, very different ideas as to, do we work with the Arabs? Do we work with the secular? Do we work with the Haredim? Is this a good coalition? Is this a bad coalition? We heard it all, one after another, as to, and each one, I think I wrote about this in one of my notes back, each one, the state of Israel depends on this. This is the most important issue, and this is how we're going to solve it, and there is no other way. So he said there's no other way. He said there's no other way. He said there's no other way. And then we had our tour guide in Gaza the next day who referenced all 3 of them and said, none of them know what they're talking about. They're all crazy. I'll tell you what we're going to do. So that was a common theme. But I just have to say, there is something invigorating about listening to a person with passion and clarity and conviction tell you, here's the problem, and the problem is clear. We all see, and this is how we're going to solve it. And you listen to it and you're like, wow, yes. And then 5 minutes later, you meet with the next one and you're like, whoa, yes. And then like 10 minutes later, you get a third one and he says like, they're crazy. This is what we're going to do. And it's so clear and it's with so much passion. Yes. And that's why the elections in Israel are a disaster. It's like, what I took out of it is something I'm still like working on. And I mentioned this, I think, to all of us, to be able to meet someone and someone say like, obviously you would never really do this because it wouldn't work at a dinner party, but they would say like, what do you do? Who are you? Like, what do you, but to have in one's head, they call it the 30-second elevator pitch, but like for our lives, this is who I am and what I represent and what I want to accomplish, was so shocking that I was thinking like, if I would be in that position, and there would be some group of high school students from Toronto that came in and they said, we're meeting with the rabbi of the shul. Tell me, what does your shul stand for? Wow. Could I, in 10 minutes, rattle off with such clarity, this is who we are, what we stand for, this is our goal, this is how we're going to accomplish it, and this is what it's going to look like when we're done. I want you to be part of it. To a degree where then every single one of those high school students out, I want to move to Montreal. It's something to learn from, to live with that clarity and conviction. I'm running out of time, so I'm going to keep moving. Mayor Kahano, I don't have a picture of because we weren't allowed. He's an official member of government, differently than the member of Knesset. We weren't allowed to take pictures. You have to get special permission, is all to do. When he became the minister of religious affairs, so on the floor in the Knesset, which I'll show you in a second, they went berserk, they yelled, they screamed, they said, how could you do this? You don't know anything about religion. You have to Google his clip, his response. He served, there's not a picture of him. He served in the army for 28 years. Besides he was in the Air Force. He did a whole bunch of different things. He said to them, screaming from the pulpit of the Knesset at the Charedim who were yelling at him, he said, have any of you daven Shmona Esrei during a military ambush, soaked in rain, trembling with cold? Have any of you been careful to always wash your hands before eating bread when you don't have a sink and a cup like you do in yeshiva? Have any of you worn your tzitzis while in training exercises in the middle of July, August heat? Have any of you prayed to God before going into battle, your life at stake? Don't any of you tell me, he said from the floor of the Knesset, about Yirat Shamayim, about fear of heaven, and about what it means to serve this country as a religious Jew. And that was like, to have a person like, it was all three of these politicians that we met are tzitzit wearing, yarmulke wearing, davening 3 times a day Jews, serving in the Knesset, openly talking about the redemption of the Jewish people, bringing about the light into the, and it was just invigorating to hear that. None of them have the same vision of how it's going to happen, but just to hear religious members of Knesset was really something special. We went to the Gaza envelope. Oh man! In the middle of one of our meetings, there's a big vote. We're going to run out of time. There's a big vote about called the reunification law, in which Israel had, I think it was the early 2000s, during one of the suicide bombing intifadas, discovered that how were they infiltrating into the land? It was because the terrorists from the West Bank were marrying Arab Israeli women from Israel proper who were citizens. And the law is, you marry an Israeli citizen, you're granted immediate citizenship, like there's a law in most countries. So they discovered that that's what the Arabs were doing. They were marrying Israeli Arab women, being given citizenship, and then coming in and blowing up sparrows. So they stopped it. The law now is you can get immediate citizenship unless you live in the West Bank and you're marrying Israel, then you don't get citizenship. That's been a big issue. It's a security issue, but of course it's racist and it's discriminatory and all those things. So there was a deadline. The deadline of the law was last Wednesday or Tuesday when we were in the Knesset, and so it was up for a vote. The coalition is so tenuous, and there are Arab members of the coalition, and Likud is really in favor of this law, but they didn't want to vote for it because they wanted the government to fail. So it was like a whole to do. But in the middle of our meeting with Elazar Stern, his aide came in and said, they're voting. So he picks up and he runs to the Knesset. So we all ran after him. We went to the gallery. We were up in the gallery. They're like, all these people just watching the proceedings in the Knesset. The Knesset it's a zoo. I actually had a video. I didn't put a video up here. So the Shafet was speaking at the time, and no one's listening. No one, not a single person in the Knesset is listening to her. We're watching. They're talking, they're schmoozing, they're walking around. The head guy is not paying. If I could tell you, there was not a soul in the room listening to her. Literally no one. And then and then they do a vote, and the vote is awesome. There's like the guy that had it, and then it says, and they all have an iPad in front of them, and he gives a clap, and then there's a screen up on the side, like 10, 9, 8. So you have until it gets down to 0 to vote. Then as soon as everybody, that's it, right? As soon as he votes, then it gives you it right away spits out, these in favor, against, abstain. And it says, oh, lo yavor. Next one. They did like 3, one after another. All 3 were lo yavor, lo yavor, lo yavor. And then Netanyahu himself, as the leader of the opposition, took the floor. It was like, I actually got to see him speak live, which was amazing. That man, like his policies, don't like his policies, like as a person, controls a room like no one's business. It's amazing. He gets up there and it's like he just holds the whole room and he starts blasting the government. It's an anti-Zionist government. They can't pass anything. And so, of course, then half the room starts getting up and screaming at him. Like you hear about these things, like in the news, like to see it live is wild. And the guy in the front is like, Shaka, and he starts calling him out by name. Stop, sit down, shame. It finally gets a little bit of quiet, and then Netanyahu gets back in, and then people start yelling and screaming again, and then some from the other side, and then he's yelling, and it's like, Giveret, Netanyahu's your party. You're disturbing. It's your own party. Stop. I was like, wow. Those deliberations went on to 4 o'clock in the morning. We were there for this little one part of the vote. It was like it was amazing to actually be there. Anyway, so we go to the Gaza envelope. We went to the actual Gaza border. This fellow, Jordan, guy's last name, is originally from Montreal. I'm hoping to get him in here to speak, but I'm not sure if we can handle it because he's really not politically correct. I'm just not sure. He's Israeli, he says it as he sees it, and it's not the way that I'm not sure all of us are ready to handle it. But it was fascinating to listen to because everything that he said, he's like been in Gaza many times. He's negotiated with high-level Gazans over the years. And so he said about all the 3 politicians that we met about the previous day, they don't know what they're talking about. I'm in Gaza. I'll tell you how we're going to solve the problem. And so he had a whole different approach. Anyway, it was really just fascinating about how he was like, Gaza, no one cares about Gaza. It's Hezbollah up in the north. That's where the government's really paying attention. Gaza, balloons, like rockets, we're not so worried. Hezbollah, all of our attention is getting ready for Hezbollah. That's going to be the problem. So it was like we're on the Gaza border. We're here all about Gaza. It's like, whatever. That's not such a problem. I'm not, no comments from me. I don't know anything. But it took us around to a number of important battlefields back from the War of Independence in 67, and War of 67, where it was really more of an issue. And go to the next one. Then we met, as I wrote about, this is Simcha and Leah Golden, whose son Hadar, Zichron Lebracha, was killed in 2014. And they were describing to us about why now is the time to get him back together with Oren and Shaul, 2 of the bodies that are being held by Hamas. And they were describing all the things that they're doing, the people that they're meeting in the U.S. They really believe it's only up to the U.S., that there's nothing anyone else can do. It was the U.S. brokered peace treaty that was violated by Hamas. They said Hamas released a video extolling, of course, how great it was that they took him captives. And what they noticed is that Hamas doctored the video and they changed the date, the hour, as to when the actual attack took place. And they made it 3 hours earlier. They have facts to prove when the attack took place. And they put out a video. They're so aware that they did it after the ceasefire. They actually have a promotional video Hamas does in which they doctored it to make it seem like they took him before the ceasefire went into effect. But their basic goal is to make the fact that Hamas is holding these bodies from what they think is an asset to make it into a liability. That's really their goal. That we won't deal with them, that the U.S. won't deal with them, that Israel won't deal with them. Not so simple that'll go. I just want to get a few more things. This is the yeshiva in Sderot. Those of you looking there, there's one thing that doesn't belong in this picture, and that is, of course, can you see? The chandeliers. As soon as we walked in, everyone's like, who's the Hungarian that donated to the yeshiva in Sderot? It happens to be a Moroccan. There's a Moroccan fellow who loves donating chandeliers to Israeli yeshivas. And I guess it's one of the largest Hesed yeshivas in all of Israel right now. It's a beautiful yeshiva. Keep going, run through. This is the famous menorah made out of rockets that landed in Sderot. This is the famous picture. There was a big hole there in the top. That's the fire that raged. This was a viral picture of one of the rockets that landed in the apartment This is where Ido Avigal was killed. 5-year-old boy, his picture dressed up in Purim in his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle costume. You've seen that went around. The rocket landed here, which is covered up by the family was not home. It destroyed the apartment, a big fire raged. What happened was shrapnel. If I could zoom in, which I can't, you see the shrapnel on this side of the building. Ido and his family was in the 3rd story, several stories below where the rocket hit, and they had done everything right. They were in their safe room. They had closed the metal sheet. They had been behind everything, and the shrapnel pierced right through, and he unfortunately was killed. The government did an investigation. They couldn't figure out what happened, and they discovered that even though it's been quiet from rockets for a number of months before this latest outburst, it doesn't mean that Hamas has been quiet, and they have upped their game. And all of the bomb shelters have 1/16 inch thick metal, and they discovered it's not enough. They are now refitting every single safe room in all of Sderot to 1/8 thick metal, because the 1/16 wasn't enough, because the rockets are coming in are much more powerful than they had been before. One of our participants noticed that the street was Struma Street. It was on the street named for the refugee ship that was torpedoed, and every single person, I think like 900 refugees except for one, died in 1942. This was we went to an Iron Dome battery and met with the soldiers there. This young lady is actually from Pennsylvania. She went to Kohelet High School, a modern Orthodox high school, and she's a Chayalet Bodedet. So we were able to speak to her in English, and you might notice you don't see the Iron Dome because you don't have to take pictures of it. We were facing the other way. But everything is controlled from a remote command center. The Chayalim at the Iron Dome do nothing all day long. Like when things are bad, unfortunately, they're busy reloading. But under normal circumstances, they're just like looking forward to buses coming by that they give them treats and letters. So it's nice to meet with her.
Is it highly fortified and protected?
No, it is just behind a farm. Like, you have to know where you're going, and then like right behind a farm is just an Iron Dome battery, and they have a whole schedule because they don't do anything. There's like nothing. Everything is controlled outside. So they they do drills. They have free time. They have art. They have exercise. It's like really amazing. This is a picture of Shechem. We went to the Shomron on our last day. This is from a Tchina factory. I'm just running out of time. I got to have a minute, like 2 minutes. There's like so much to say. We met an Israeli guy. There's like a group of Jews, about 200 families, who believe in the written Torah and not the oral law. Like old holdbacks. In the times of the Gemara, there were people like this. They were called Karayim and the Tzdukim. So there's a group of 200 families. They bring a Korban Pesach every year. They have a Kohen Gadol. So in the Tchina factory that we stopped off right outside the city of Shechem in the Shomron, we met one of them. He gave us a little talk about what it's like being he's like a Jew. He's an Arab. He's like in no man's land because the Jews don't really recognize him as Jews. But he didn't realize he was speaking to a group of rabbis as a regular guy. And the rabbis are like, okay, how do you guys practice this? What do you do for your tefillin? What parsha did you read this week? And the poor guy is like, it was like, it's hilarious. Like all these rabbis are like licking their chops, like, wow, what would it be like to only have the written law and not the oral law? We have 1,000 questions for you. It's like, I just make tefillin. I don't know. It was hilarious. Poor guy, they whisked him away. There was like a little bit too much. Let me just go to my, I drank the wine. I couldn't help myself. I drank the wine. Like wine grown in the Shomron, a fulfillment of the prophecies of the land coming back to life. Oh, I couldn't help it. Like everything I want to be a farmer. I really decided I'm going to be a farmer during Shemitah. That's when I'm going to open up my farm. My editorial comment on the way, to conclude before we dive in Mincha, as I said, no one agrees on anything. Not from a religious perspective, from a political perspective, how to handle the Arabs. Everything is, but everything is with strength and conviction. I would offer the following parable. It's not a perfect parable, but it's a parable. A young child is petulant, is argumentative, but is a little child. The child needs its parents. Teenage years are a unique stage of our own development. We all went through them, as we see it with children. What is it about the teenage years that is so complicated? Teenage years is the battle for independence. It's where a child is no longer a little child, is not yet an adult, not yet totally independent on their own, still dependent on mommy and daddy for certain things, and they fight over everything, whether or not you are yet independent or you're not yet independent. Are you independent yet to decide when you can drive and where you can drive and how late you can stay? Everything is a fight because the child's ready and the parents not yet. And on each and every thing. This is an editorial comment. This is just like my experience of being there after like being away for 18 months. That was the experience of like teenage years. What do I mean by that? For the first 50, 60 years of Israel's existence, the North American community supported it and gave it everything it needed, a lot of what it needed. And there was like this sort of big brother, little brother dynamic. They always had to look to America, like, is this okay? Are we allowed to do this? And if America says no, okay, we can't do anything. And the same thing was true with American Jewry. And there's a shift. It was a dramatic shift. I spoke about it a little bit on Shabbos, in which the state, the people are becoming independent to a degree in which we're strong, we are powerful, and we are fighting for that independence. And like it or not, this is what we're becoming. This is what we're doing. Yeah, they still need the aid. I'm not saying but there's just a sense of the shift is that they're going to take care of us. When we met with Mizrahi, like our mission is to take care of the diaspora Jews. We're going to make sure that you have shlichim, that you have educational programs. We're worried about you. And every time we would hear that, we're the ones supposed to be worrying about you. It's shifting very dramatically and very clearly that the center of the world, as I said on Shabbos, is there, and they're worried, concerned, making sure that we're okay. And there's this. Yeah, they fight about everything. You know what? That's what teenagers do. As you become independent, this is the only way to do it. There is no other way. And it will lead to a few years down the road where that's what's happening. And it's our job to connect. I know we need to dive minute. We're starting in 1 second. We're just finishing up. But it was so great to be back. It was great to see what's going on. It's lively, it's filled with life, it's vibrant, it's pulsating, even without the tourists. It's simply the home of the Jewish people, watching it develop from Shomron to the Sderot, to the big cities, of course. It's just where the Jewish people are, where the Jewish future is. And it was amazing. I would have more to share, but we're already a little bit late. So it was just great to be on the trip and look forward to just sharing guests as we'll go along over time, a couple other thoughts along the way. Yeah, I'll leave that as we enter into the week of getting ready for Tisha B'Av, mourning and yearning and grieving for the loss of how everything is coming back to life and so strong in our homeland. Okay, we'll have a mincha.